Life in Code. Life in Code, Episode 1, Cybersecurity.
Good morning, good morning. Or, yeah,
Hi.
oh, good morning.
Yes, yes. Happy Saturday morning, in fact.
Oh my goodness, I love the hair. It
Oh,
looks
thank
so
you.
nice. It looks
Oh, thank you. I
amazing.
love yours. This is like we all have the curls in the body.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
For Saturday morning, of course.
Absolutely. Good morning, Irene. Nice to meet you. How are
Nice
you?
to meet you too. I'm good. I'm good. I guess I'll give you a little introduction about myself because I feel like we haven't met before. Maybe we have, at like a networking thing, but
Are you in the SBEL program?
I am.
Possibly.
Yeah. So my name's Irene Johnson. I'm a junior honors international business major and I'm minoring in international affairs. So I'm from Oklahoma by way of India. So that's just a little bit about me. That's my Howard intro. And so yeah, it's very nice to
Awesome.
have you today.
Thank
I
you.
was
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I was like telling everybody, look, I have a Saturday podcast.
yeah.
I have to be on my P's. It's almost like a job interview for me. I was like, I have to come correct. It's like my early homecoming.
I
Mhm.
mean, not to add any more pressure, but you are going to be like the first member like to join the podcast. You are our special guest, our first, special guest on the podcast. So, the
Well,
pressure
it's an
is
honor.
it's here, it's here. Um,
Right. Not to set the bar too high, right? But
yeah.
it's an honor just to speak to you guys and share whatever experiential knowledge I have. And it's pretty funny because I looked at the questions and I'm like, I'm not telling these students anything that they don't know. You guys are, you know what I mean? Super intelligent, on the ball. I'm just
Mhm.
excited to understand like more contextually what questions you
Mhm.
have, from like the theory that you're in and then just the world space that you all occupy as young people. So for sure, bring it on. Let's do it.
Okay, well, just for in terms of like introductions, Irene gave hers. I'm gonna give mine really quick, for those listening, because this will be both like put up on YouTube as well as put on like just the audio on our streaming platforms. So, hello everyone. My name is Angel Ortiz III. I am a junior now, honors computer information systems major from the great state of Maine, and the head of the Coding Collaborative and Coding Collaborative's new podcast, Life in Code. We have an amazing special guest today, an amazing cybersecurity guru. We have today Tiffany Savage. Yay! And I would love for you just for two things, to give us a little bit of an intro about who you are, what you do, and then also something even more important. I was inspired today by this morning drink I had. This is a lemon tea Snapple, and so I want you to tell us what your favorite non-water beverage is to let the people know who you are, like the
Okay.
deep stuff.
Okay, that's a good icebreaker. That's a good rapport builder. Okay, so my name is Tiffany Savage. I'm from Washington D.C. actually, born and raised.
Yes.
Yes, and I was actually born at Howard University Hospital, so I'm very much a local.
Are you
To the
serious?
very serious.
Wow.
To that community, so I'm like very very Howard. You know what I'm saying? Go us. And so I actually was not a computer science or an information technology major at Howard. I was a strategic, legal, and management
Oh.
communication major. My minor was political science, so completely different from technology. I had a
Mhm.
late kind of introduction to technology. I ended up serving in the military for 4 years, and I did all source intelligence, and this was even before there was a cyber command. So I still was not introduced into the field that I currently am in. I went to business school. I got my MBA, and I began working for Amazon in robotic fulfillment, and still wasn't in cybersecurity or it wasn't until actually COVID, the COVID area, maybe like 2020, in which I actually made the transition into cybersecurity formally. And I did that through some professional certifications, and that kind of really helped me build my confidence and my competence, obviously, but my confidence in being able to learn these skill sets and challenge myself because they had not necessarily been introduced to me to that point. And so now I work in financial payments industry, doing cybersecurity engineering So I've done everything from incident response to more project-based work as far as continual improvement and feedback loop analysis goes. Then on the more technical side, as of recently, I am an ethical hacker. So we're doing what would be considered a lot of white hat, essentially defensive penetration testing, if you will, offensive strategies, but for the purposes of defending native application and products of the financial nature. So that is a little bit about me.
That's amazing. Like that is absolutely amazing. And there are so many points there that really kind of like, drew my attention. But I think the most important for me was the fact that, you didn't really even get your foot into the technical field that you're working in right now until much later, which I think for those possibly listening who are in CIS or even in finance or any major really, who are thinking like, oh, I'm in the wrong major, I'm doing the wrong thing as an undergrad. Undergrad will not dictate your entire kind of future, your life. If anything, you'll probably learn some fundamental skills that you'll be able to implement within your job in the future, just maybe in a way that you never kind of foresaw before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that it's really important, and then it's really an honor to speak to you guys, because it's a full circle moment for me, because when you're in it, and you're like, it's funny, I thought I was going to go directly to law school at some point, and it's like still it's definitely not off the table for somebody like me. Obviously, I'm a like forever student.
No, you're a learner.
I am a learner, like I love it, but like at the time it was very like I was in the honors program, the Annenberg honors program. It was like, I have to do this, and like that's just not how it happened, and so life will kind of shake you that way, and you think it's like, okay, it's over for me in that way. But all of these unique experiences that you will have, they will be difficult, but you will definitely learn from them, and it will make you a better whatever you choose to be. I promise you that.
Yes, it's amazing.
For sure.
So I want to ask, when you went from, being in the Army to going to Amazon and getting your MBA, they call that like the art of pivoting. Like you just kept pivoting, right? And was there ever a point in your life where you knew you had to pivot? Like you were like, I'm becoming a little bit complacent in where I am. I want something new for myself. And how did you determine that for yourself?
That's such a good question. Just relevant to us, right? When I was at Howard, so I went to Banneker. I don't know if you guys know the high school across the street. I'm very local, like the McDonald's, like know me, so as the girl saying, know me. But that was that was my seminal like education. I feel like most of what I know, that was like my point. And so when I got to Howard, I think I had a different expectation for discourse, and then I think it was just like a culture shock for me socially, because I didn't have all of the social skills that a lot of my peers had, which is understandable, and a lot of us go through that. But I think what used to be my cornerstone was academics, and when I got to Howard, I wasn't so sure. I had chosen correctly. I didn't know how to navigate the space enough to be as flexible as I could have been. So there was a moment where it was like, okay, like going to class isn't like me. You know what I mean? Like not being into it is like I went from like living and breathing for school to like just being completely turned off by it and disinterested and not knowing how to get to where I wanted to go. And so I had to make a decision. Did I want to continue? You know what I'm saying? To keep underperforming, because it's very expensive to do that at Howard University and in life. First, like, okay, I have a bill attached with the level of productivity, the level of get up and go that I have. This is becoming real. And so I had to make a decision. And, Washington, D.C. is one of the most expensive places to live in the world. So, like I personally had to make a decision to say, being under those financial constraints, social constraints, mental constraints, you're growing as a young adult. I could continue to operate at this level and get these results, or I could try something different. And my eldest brother actually served in the military, and he, even though being 100% medically discharged from an incident from his service, he told me he thought it would be good for me. So I was like, "Pew, I'm out of here." So it's like,
Oh,
I was like 21 and everybody was like, "You're leaving, you're leaving school and then you're going." I'm like, "Yes." Like, because I knew that I needed like diametrically different atmosphere. So like, I was ready to get back into school full time. I needed the money, I needed rent. Like, DC is very tough. So
Yeah.
very like introspective moment and nobody can tell me anything. And that's kind of how I
Yeah.
pivot. It's like very much like taking stock of the present conditions. It's like there's something that is in defensive cybersecurity heavily, but it's really militaristic. It's called the OODA loop. And it's about decision making under like kind of like hostile environments or circumstances where you're able to observe, orient, direct, and then take action. Decide and then take the action. Because it's like things aren't going to stop being high pressure, but how are you taking stock of like where you want to go versus where you are, and then like what are the things that inform that? I'm very scientific, method oriented. I believe that it's probably best to implement it in most problem sets in different ways, right? In context, but we should do that with ourselves. And sometimes that demands you to pivot, And I think I've chosen jobs, roles, industries that offer me that, but that has to do with me honoring myself, right? If I would still be looking at that 19-year-old girl in the quad, you know what I mean? I'd be comfortable, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I might be comfortable to take that decision, but you have to say, oh, okay, that was presented to me in that way so that I could learn what I could do if I made the decision. Like, I thought I was never going to finish my degree. You know what I mean? Like, this is like, girl, like, but when you're in it, again, you're so tied to those outcomes that but you have to develop a healthy relationship to risk, especially and therere's educated risk. I think that's the value of us being like a university, because you're able to look at the historical analysis in an unbiased way, right? And you're learning the information literacy that you need to make better decisions. So I was looking at the big picture, like, okay, what can I do to inoculate myself from some things, economic, socioeconomic. What can I do? Oh, okay.
yeah.
And just moving like that. Like, that's how I got into cyber. It was like, I don't want to be a frontline manager. Like, I have an MBA and I'm frontline managing. No shade. But I think intellectually we go through these things where we're doing things. We're in the labor system and we're intellectually outgrowing it, and that's amazing, because it's on us to place okay, let me push the boundary. Let me see what I can do over here. Okay, let me, like, when I was at Amazon, I have so many lessons learned, but it's like, like, if I could have just had these, this competency or that competency, but there was just like no time for me. In that, but that you learn the culture of a space, and you learn like how to be successful in those spaces in retrospect, and those are all lessons, even at Howard initially. So
I think something that you mentioned. No, that was beautiful, and I think you brought up many amazing points. One of which being how expensive DC is as a college student. It's always saying like how the broke college student is like we are the paradigm for just like we are broke college students. We can't do anything, but in DC, everything, walking, riding a bus, everything costs money. School costs money. And so I think for Irene and I, we know this firsthand. Like it's just it's insane, and it's just been rising as time goes on. But something I caught on towards the end there was kind of talking about competencies and looking more on the technical side of things. I think this is really pertaining to cyber, but I think technical work as a whole. How do you go about gaining those competencies when there is just like so much at your fingertips? I know for me personally, as a growing technologist who's interested in like software development, there's a new kind of a language, there's a new topic, there's a new technique that's introduced almost daily, especially with the kind of integration of AI into the whole mix of things. How do you choose what competencies to first go on, sink your teeth into, and learn?
That's such a good question. I think when you're like a genuinely passionate technologist, don't expect to like ever be satisfied with like one stack or like being the go-to for anything. I don't think that's how it how we are, right, as thinkers. So just accept that, but think about prioritization, and I think that has a lot of applications, but specific to the technologies that you're looking at, because there's only a certain amount of time in the day that we have, and there's only a certain amount of physical capacity that you have, and with this work, it's very high stress, right? People don't say it, but it's now kind of like a defense thing, right? So like, like understanding technologies and being able to defend them is almost like a national security issue now. So like, there's a lot of stress associated with wanting and needing to learn what these advances in technology is. So I want to honor that. You have to find balance. And I like to think about it as prioritization. So not only what is trending or developing, because there's literally something new at every second of the day, but for you and the purposes of what you're doing, whether that be your independent project or the job sector or role that you are targeting. I encourage people, if you're not in the actual industry already, especially as a student, pull a job rec. Have a dream job rec and reverse engineer it. Okay, so what are the technologies in this thing that I want to do? Excuse me. What are those technologies, and how can I gain those competencies? Now we have stuff like the Udemy, which I love, YouTube, Coursera, and then there's a lot of other free resources. And I will get with you guys and share some resources that you can share with everybody as a part of this. But prioritize with that. If you're in the workforce, or like for myself, what's on fire? Like, this is probably, I've had so many aha moments. I don't work in GRC. Obviously, it has an impact on what I do. Highly drives what I do. But I think the more that I've internalized that, it's easier for me, because there are frameworks, there are frameworks for what I should pay attention to and when. Because realistically, again, you can only do what you can do as an organization. So what are the most critical things that I'm working with? And then how am I determining that criticality as far as the data or information or the processes that they're running or they have access to? And then what are the regulatory or industry frameworks, right, that are applicable to that? What is my level of maturity as an organization? And then how can I measure that? And then what recommendations are there? So at every step of that process, you're identifying the people, processes, and technology involved. And so I was able to observe that firsthand with when I was working in incident response. And I joined an organization a week before a 0 day. And so while I did think that I might have lose my job in that moment, because I was like, I really want to, like, what is going on? Like, they say that these don't happen, like, and I got second week, there's one, but it allowed me to observe everything. And so again, I really got my job in the military honest, because I love to be nosy. I just love to know. I just really want to know. Like, I really want to be the person, like, me.
Yes. Yes.
I can't help it. It's so, I just got to observe the entire organization. I was like, oh, I clocked the whole tea. Like, oh, so this is where the bodies are buried. This is what we do great. This is what we don't do great, right? And there's plenty of framework out here to help guide that process. And so while the field is overwhelming, yes, there's so, like, literally overwhelming in the sense of alerts and things that could be wrong. But you can't do everything, right? That's expensive. And we have to think about this as far as I only have a job because it's a corporate priority. Right? And so it is dollars and cents. So we don't have all of that in the world. Right. Think of it to, like, not just your time, but like, this is potentially going to be someone's money. You're going to have to come to them, and say, oh, I need budget for this because this. What's the impact? And not just the potential impact, but what's the likelihood? And so that's how you start really solidifying risk. Just wrap your head around the quantitative thing about risk, even how you prioritize your time. Okay, like, so what's the potential impact of me not cooking dinner tonight?
Right.
What's the likelihood that impact is going to happen, and what's the cost of that? Okay, I'm gonna go over my Uber Eats budget. I don't really want to do that. Let me cook some groceries.
Yeah.
Benefit analysis is there.
Right. I love earlier you had said part of your growth was to develop a healthy relationship with risk.
Yes.
And like what would you say, because we're all people of color, and I feel like societally people of color have a propensity to be risk averse just because, we don't want to muddy our hands, we don't want to do anything that's going to cause attention to us. So how did you navigate that as a woman of color in your field, becoming more and more risk adaptive, more and more acquainted with it?
Mhm. I think that that's such a good question. Ooh, that's a great question. You're getting deep, okay?
I know I have to for
Right.
people. I want the tea too. I want the tea.
It's like, girl, from like being, I feel like not rock bottom, but when you take stock of things where you're not, where you really honor and you have the humility to say, I'm not where I want to be.
Right.
And so I won't even say rock bottom, but I would say if you have the level of saying, I'm not where I want to be, I feel like I want to get there as soon as possible. Like I got to the point where I started wanting to get there as soon as possible, because then it would allow me to be like, what are my options? Like you immediately become more open-minded to things. You have to take some risk, because the opposite of taking risk is you completely being isolated and you not growing. That's like me, that can't go back in time, but it's like I could stay at Howard and not challenge myself, or I could do this thing that's going to ensure that I have more academic flexibility, I have more financial security. I literally came back to Howard and finished my degree. You understand what I'm saying? So like if I had, when you say there's no options at this level of risk that I'm taking, and so how you balance risk, and we bring it into an organizational aspect, let's say in a cybersecurity context, right? We're going to close our systems and we're going to maximize security. Or I'm going to create a risk appetite for myself, right? So what risk am I willing to take in order to increase functionality? But the security is inherently being impacted by that.
Right.
And so the idea is to what mitigating controls, there are several types of controls, but what mitigating controls can I put into place? Because my business has to take this risk. I have to accept username and password on the client, right? My client, so we're talking, because all of this is in the context of business and financial decisions. So you design a site and you have all of this ideation around features that take risk, because anytime you open up your application or your server to input from users, that is risk. Anytime you're allowing the user to take action on the client unchecked by the server fully, that's the level of risk. But to the functionality of your value that you're delivering to your customer, how do you make that trade-off? And so that's kind of the balance that we have to strike. What is necessary to my customer? What's necessary to my life? Going out, maybe, having a social experience, being around what's necessary to my life, and what level of risk am I going to allow, and what mitigating controls do I need to put in place to make sure? And typically you want to start at the bottom, and this is the security conversation, because I talk to developers and it's like, we want this, that, and the third, because they're functionality driven, and I respect that. But why should somebody be able to walk into your house and go directly to your bedroom?
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Right.
Yeah.
But we don't expect people to show up at our door and walk in to try to work. But my job is to expect the unexpected, and to sometimes, and a lot of times, prove it to you. And that's how I'm growing in my professional development, is taking it further.
Yeah.
How do I take this further and validate it and make sure that it's validated technically?
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. I think that the question that I'm going to ask now is kind of something I think you outlined within kind of that explanation. it's almost like aligning like what is the basis of cybersecurity, and this is of course like we just discussed it. It's risk, it's like preventing the risk, but maybe kind of extrapolating on that, explaining that a little bit more. Like, what are some common myths that people possibly have around cybersecurity, and like what are like the actual hard hitting truths that should actually keep you up at night revolving cybersecurity?
I guess one of the myths that I can't like officiate it or anything like that, but I feel like a lot of people think that cybersecurity is just kind of like the hacking
Mm,
portion, when their ideation of it is just like really in relation to a hacker. Um, but we have to like preface it more so within computer technology, because a hacker was essentially a programmer, he or she was not initially a malicious one. They simply were able to use the computing technology in a way that it was not expected to be used. And so that's kind of the cornerstone of my catch-all phrase of my catch-all definition of cybersecurity. I think that's the easiest way to understand it. Um, is the prevention, the detection, right? um you know the eradication and containment of instances in which the technology is essentially used in a way that is not expected to be used, whether that's malicious or not. That can pertain to the people who are involved in this process, such as the professionals and like the cybersecurity engineers and analysts. That could refer to the technologies, and we're talking about people are probably more familiar with things like firewalls, antivirus software, anti-malware software, and encryption. People are probably more familiar with encryption ciphers and things of that nature, or even through the use of websites like TLS and transport layer security. It can refer to those technologies, right? Or it can refer to processes like incident response processes, threat detection, threat intelligence, and it can refer to processes on the other side. So that was implementation, and when things go wrong, it can refer to the design of things. When you talk about things like DevSecOps, and the
yeah.
integration of tooling that makes this possible, and you think about things like SAST and static application scanning tools, and more broadly for the developers, the secure software development lifecycle. And so it's a cybersecurity in and of itself is just like this big behemoth broad term. It doesn't mean any one thing in particular. And when you're researching this and when you're looking into it, there is not a definitive definition of it. And so I like to encourage people to go with sources that have a lot of credibility, such as like a NIST or a CISA, and that's CISA, I believe .gov, which will give you more definitive, kind of a more firm definition of it. But again, focusing on those actions that people and processes and organizations and tools take to detect and prevent and mitigate, any type of unintentional action by a computer system or a technology is the basis.
Yeah. That I loved how you explained that so much, because I mean it's true. Like when someone asks me, like I'm a cybersecurity concentration, I'm just at the start of my like cyber journey, but even in classes now when we're describing like what is the basis of cybersecurity, it's not something that you can say in one sentence. It is like so many different things, and like you mentioned, it's the byproduct of kind of pre-existing technology, and just regular basic people like programmers who are figuring out different ways to use it, possibly in ways that it wasn't intended to, and possibly in ways that are pretty malicious or malignant to, large corporations, people, businesses, other things like that. Uh, but moving forward, and I'm sorry, I hate to ask this question, but this is a coding podcast, so I have to do it. How do you see kind of, well, how about I rephrase this? What is your kind of idea, or how do you see artificial intelligence making a impact in kind of the larger scope of cybersecurity, and what are some kind of worries that you have as a cybersecurity professional, excuse me, uh, within kind of the new integration of AI into modern day processes?
Um, I will say that it in and of itself does not keep me up at night. Um, I will say that. I think it is a development in a continuum um, of a technology strategy that we were already moving in this direction of increased productivity being uh, the primary use case for a lot of our emerging technology. And so I feel like if we accept it within a continuum, I think, is it a major shift? Yes, but I think it's kind of to be expected in my opinion. Um, with the outlook of it, I think the most interesting thing about it is that we don't know. And I think that's the gotcha with it, because as far as ROI, in my opinion, most of it has been in the productivity side. Um, but we also have to take a step back in defining this thing, right? And understanding like what level of analysis that a lot of people are making their conjectures on, because some of this is closed, right? Where these systems can be built to make better and better usage of bodies of knowledge that are existing and more contrite and closed. And then some of these things are open. And I think that's when we get nervous about the outcome because we don't know. But a lot of people have done the cost benefit analysis to say that the potential positives of this outweigh the risk, even though those risks are heretofore immeasurable. And so, being that this is already taking place, meaning generative artificial intelligence using open systems has largely already been integrated into most of, let's say, Fortune 500. We now have to look at, okay, these potential incomes. And the main one that really like tangibly jumps out to me is data security, as well as integrity. So definitely if we just keep it contrite in terms of the CIA triad, I would say integrity, confidentiality, and integrity. What I mean by that, meaning if we don't necessarily have a full architectural baseline of how the data and information is moving throughout the system, and the system is open, this is why we continuously see the hallucinations and the aberrations, right? How can we determine how the data is truly being handled? And that's just a question that I like. It's like an open question for everyone now, and we're studying that. But I think what I want to say is, and it's like any innovation, it's these things are dreamed up. I'm a huge fan of the Matrix. I'm a huge fan of the Matrix. And I sincerely believe that when it comes to computer science, there is what we can dream up, and then there's the money that someone finds and the intelligence and us that people find to make this a thing, to say that, okay, we want to implement zero trust across the organization. Like, how you do that? Like, we'll figure it out. This is why you go to an amazing research university like Howard University. And it becomes our job as not just the academics, but the people to say, this is what this needs to be. And so within that definition, I think the potential good of it in that capacity could be great. Doesn't need regulation 100%, like immediately, but that's not going to stop its development, right? Into whatever level of intelligence that it will become. I mean, when we talk about things like protein mapping, when we talk about things like all of those biomedical use cases, it's incredible. The up that it will give and the good that it could potentially do and is doing. But when we talk about the use cases of just blatant productivity, if we know that organizations don't already have the cyber maturity and then they've chosen to implement this, it's going to lead to a whole nother unforeseen set of circumstances. So it's not like I'm screaming about it, but it's like, okay, new attack surface. Because also when you think about cybersecurity, you think about the attack surface. And so it's like a chess game. Like the more things that we want to be able to do as creative individuals, once that becomes possible for us to communicate that way, it's potentially able to be used for another purpose. Like it's literally, you take one step forward and one step back. And we're kind of like hedging that way each time that we innovate. And so I think it's to be expected, definitely to be regulated, but also to be used. I mean, when we talk about incident response and we talk about signature identification, so the use of AI and machine learning is going to be a lot more adaptive, right? Just by computing power alone to identify things across large bodies of log data coming in and out. It's going to be able to recognize a lot more things than the individual human. Again, that's a productivity conversation, but it's also an accuracy conversation. Like, how can I like to think about a human-centered approach. Like, how are we as humans, how are we using it? Are we building it? And so to that matter, I think that we're developing a whole another type of intelligence in tandem with the AI. So yeah, that's my bit on AI.
No, I think that was beautifully constructed because you mentioned so many like words that I'm hearing like now in my kind of intro to cybersecurity classes, like the CIA triangle, the attack surfaces, and of course like the continuation of the fact that AI isn't really just like this mystical force. I think that's often something that people have in their brains because of movies and like The Matrix, but it's really important for us to like bring it down to where it is and realize that it's human made and it takes in just human data. And it's all at the end of the day about data. So cars are not going to be lifted out of the air by like telekinesis. No, it's a pretty human-based problem, and it's something, not problem, but human-based situation, and it needs to be learned because the biggest actual problem we have around artificial intelligence, like you mentioned, is the unknown. It's just we don't know exactly the parameters or the limits for bad or good that this artificial intelligence can have an impact on, especially when it comes to the cyberspace and the different kind of attack surfaces and therefore the attack vectors of what it can kind of accomplish. So I think that was beautiful. Thank you. We are kind of rounding up on the hour. So I think, Irene, if you have one more question, that'll
Yeah.
kind of out.
Oh, well, okay. I'm going to choose my favorite one, I guess. And then maybe if we have time, my last one. So I have to bring it back to us being people of color, and especially you being a woman of color. I mean, we don't come across a lot of people like that in your field, but how do you see the future of people of color and women of color in the tech and cyberspace? Like every day there's a new Silicon Valley startup coming up, but still you don't see as many young people of color beginning and developing those ideas. So where do you see the future? Is there certain resources we should seek as students to kind of get that leg up on that?
I think the most important thing, because we all have like the ability to understand this. Again, so that's really it. Understanding that this is a possibility will do so much for so many people. And that's to take it even beyond, our peers who, were blessed enough to attend university and those who were not. Understand that this is a possibility because, and you changed your wording, Angel, but it is a problem. And there are problems rather, and this is a potential way, meaning not just programmatic problem solving, but technology in and of itself. Like that's the business utility of it. So I think that we as people of color have to first understand that we're probably more positioned to be better technologists than most because we have a lot of problems. To be fair, we experience a lot of marginalization. We experience a lot of under resource. And so one thing that I learned literally in business school was that where there is need, there's opportunity. And I think that if we took a step back and begin designing those things, we're inherent engineers, and it doesn't take a university or even a certification or a job offer to qualify you to begin saying, okay, well, what are the possible solutions, specifically technical solutions, to whatever problem I'm identifying. And then once you understand, what those possibilities are, giving yourself the credit to then go learn that. And so when it comes to resources of learning, there's no time. Going back to AI, there's never been a time, and this is not about necessarily accepting all of what it gives you as valid information, but that's just one use case in the ChatGPT use case. But it's now been integrated into our library systems, and document readers. You understand what I'm saying? Like, so
Yeah.
the information is becoming increasingly accessible when we know where to look. And so some of us, we have access, others, really, how can we magnify those two things and those facts, those first steps? Because I feel like once you understand the practical application of it, and then you're rooted in that experientially as a person of color, and then you understand, oh, I do have the possibility. What are the tools now that I need to get that done? And so how can we help bridge the gap between us who have Howard University research relationship and those who don't, community wise, right? You're like, this is about truth and service, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Now that I know that I can build a solution to dots, how can I turn around and help somebody else just understand that? And I think a lot of times we think we got to graduate first. Like, I need this many followers, subs, I need this, that, and the third before I go tell somebody what they should do or need to do. But sometimes it's not about telling them what they should or need to do, but it's what they can do. Because I think for myself, like, nobody told me that I could do this. And even now, like, as you grow and you learn, and I'm like, just like now I'm doing back-end integrations, I'm like,
right.
Boy, go look at this. How can I tell people that? Because y'all are gonna have a whole nother set of ideas and applications for that. And then look how much change we've created just by saying, yo, you could. How much more efficiency if you have students, if y'all have a data, a research clinic where you're showing people how to implement Python for research purposes, because the instructors can only do so much because they're in la la land, they're not in practice.
Yep.
So how do we start like bridging those gaps and creating like substantive waves of knowledge being created, it being really harvested? Because again, we don't have a dearth of problems. That's what, when you think about VC, these people have a dearth of problems.
Yeah.
They're looking for problems. We understand that. Just like, oh, I'm not supposed to use my own money. I'm not supposed to catch my 401k out to start my tech company.
Yeah.
I am supposed to present this problem in a way that connects to impact. And there's, again, no one in the world is situated like a person of color. Particularly a woman of color.
Yep. We have a lot of opportunity, and I that's such a good. You said where there's a need, there's an opportunity.
Yes.
And I mean, I hope this podcast serves that as an opportunity for people who are listening, as a way to be like, hey, I can do this. There are resources for me, and
absolutely.
And quick question, what are you like reading? What are you listening to keep up with like these ever-changing cybersecurity tech happenings in the world?
Too many things. Too many things. And again, I really do want to follow up. We'll follow up, and I'll give you even like just a short reading list. But I will say one thing that really lit a fire in me, and it's not new. It's Charlton McIlwain, Black Software, and I like that book so much I stole it from Petworth Library. I will bring it back when I come home, but that's how much I like the book. But I still have it. It's a good way to preface this, and again, I love research, so Sorry if I'm being done with this methodology. But when you research like black people and technology, most of what's offered is saying we're not present. And so it's good to get primary information that supports otherwise, because it's like, what, since America has America, what have we not done?
Yeah.
Or the world, really, right? You know, people of color
Right.
have always indigenously been present. However, the narrative when it comes to technology, even in reference to, and it is not a you know, I'm not coming for you, but like we keep perpetuating it. There's not a lot of me, but sometimes, but in certain spaces, baby, I like, shout out to Baddies in Tech, the best Discord on the internet.
Baddies in Tech.
Baddies in Tech.
Shout out to Ali. Best Discord on the
Amazing.
internet. It's like the M&M's commercial. They do exist. We are here, but if the narrative is saying you're not here, I can't do it, can I? Because if we could do it, then we would be doing it more. So like, how do we really like preface this within the fact that we can honor this fact? We can get this competency, we can execute this competency because we have been executing this competency. And so software is has just rich data. And we're talking about like Black people setting up bulletins, you know what I mean? You know, like before the internet bubble pops, like
Yes.
being on the internet, okay? Like
chronically.
Okay. And it's like they're trying to tell you that this is you're a only, you know, you're no in the context of this, and so I must break this context.
Right. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, start there, and then I have a lot more books, but
I think for sure what we could do is we'll probably put we'll of course have the follow-up, and we'll put the list of books and stuff within the YouTube subscription, and probably link the reading list on the website, just so that for those interested in possibly exploring some of those titles, getting to learn a little bit more about the topics mentioned today even, and Black and other POCs with people within the tech field, they can do that. But I think, unfortunately, guys, we have reached the end of our first episode. We discussed so much today. Today has been deeply inspiring for me to see that, yes, there are people of color, there are women of color just like you doing it huge in the cybersecurity space, the tech space, and just really, of course, they are there, but it's still inspiring to see people like yourself doing it the way you are. You are just so well read, you construct everything so beautifully, and you are kind of my bar for, you know, where I want to be as someone starting off where I am in the cyberspace. So and I thank you.
Please exceed me. Like, one thing that I continuously remind myself, and you have to, there's no such things as exceptionalism. Like I am not exceptional. This is in everybody. It just takes for you to understand that, and for that to be real for you in whatever capacity that you're working. So I do want to leave that with everybody. We all have literally within us the ability to turn up in whatever way that we're meant to be honest. And so stay curious, if nothing else. Like, I think that curiosity will just get you where you need to go.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene.
Yes.
All right,
hopefully
guys.
We'll see you again soon.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Don't be strangers.
Will not be. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Bye-bye.
You guys enjoy.
Life in Code.